Imagine you're running a marathon,
Oh, man.
right? You've been training for months, you're sweating, your muscles are absolutely screaming, and you finally see it.
The finish line.
Exactly. That pristine ribbon strung across the track. You cross it, you throw your hands up, the crowd is going wild.
Best feeling in the world.
Yeah, but then you're bending over, trying to catch your breath, and an official walks up, taps you on the shoulder and says, "Great job. That was the qualifying heat. The actual race starts right now."
Wow. That realization, I mean, that the finish line you just poured your soul into crossing is actually just a starting block that's one of the most jarring psychological shifts a person can experience.
Totally.
It requires a complete rewiring of, what you thought the goal actually was.
And that's exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are unpacking a fascinating manuscript titled From Convert to Follower.
It's really a compelling blend of theological deep dive and highly practical behavioral psychology.
It is. Our mission today is to map out this very specific human journey. We're looking at the transition from an initial massive life decision, which in this context is spiritual salvation, to the much longer and honestly often grueling marathon of lifelong discipleship.
Right, because we're looking at how a person moves beyond that sort of honeymoon phase of a profound life change to actually build an actionable, sustainable practice of growth.
Yeah, because we culturally obsess over the celebratory moment, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. We love the before and after picture, the wedding day, the ribbon cutting ceremony.
Right.
But the core thesis of this manuscript is that treating that initial moment of spiritual conversion as the final destination is a complete trap.
A trap, yeah.
It leaves individuals with this stagnant framework that inevitably stalls out simply because it was never designed to be the end of the road.
Think about the day you got your driver's license. You go to the DMV, you take that notoriously awkward photo.
Oh, yeah, the worst.
They hand you a piece of plastic, and it's this singular, triumphant moment. You are officially a licensed driver.
Congratulations.
Right. But having that card in your wallet does not mean you actually possess the skills to, say, merge onto a crowded highway in a torrential downpour.
No, it definitely doesn't.
It doesn't mean you have the muscle memory to anticipate a car suddenly braking in front of you.
Right. The license grants you the legal right to be on the road. But learning the complex mechanics of navigating traffic, understanding weather conditions, and developing defensive reflexes, that takes a lifetime behind the wheel.
Exactly.
And the manuscript takes that very concept and applies it to faith, creating this really sharp distinction between the initial planting of a seed and the long-term cultivation of a harvest.
Yeah, and the text introduces a couple of theological terms here that sound a bit, dusty. Justification and sanctification.
Seminary words, basically.
Right. But the mechanics behind them are crucial.
Yeah.
So justification or salvation is described as the planting of the seed. It's the moment the license is handed to you. It's instantaneous.
Yeah. Mechanically speaking, justification is a change in status. It's a legal declaration.
Mm-hmm.
Sanctification, though, which the text equates to discipleship, is a change in state. It's biological developmental growth.
So a seed being dropped in the dirt is an event.
Exactly. But for that seed to become a tree, it requires this daily, relentless process of breaking down nutrients, absorbing sunlight, surviving droughts.
And to ground this in reality, the manuscript points to the historical account of Zacchaeus.
Oh, yeah, this is a great example.
Most people know him as, like, the guy who climbed a tree to see Jesus. They have this brief encounter, and that is his conversion moment. That's the seed.
Right.
But the text argues that his actual discipleship, the sanctification part, was the grueling aftermath. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, which, in that socioeconomic context, meant he was basically a state-sanctioned extortionist.
He was hated.
Yeah. So his discipleship wasn't just a polite apology. It was the highly uncomfortable, tangible act of liquidating his own wealth to pay back everyone he swindled 4 times over.
Which is wild. And, the early church understood this mechanism perfectly. New converts who were known historically as catechumens, they weren't just given a theological exam and sent on their way.
Right, like good luck.
Yeah, exactly. They went through rigorous multi-year mentoring and moral formation.
Wow.
Multi-year. The leaders of that era understood that an internal intellectual awakening had to be hammered out into an external behavioral reality. Otherwise, it was purely theoretical.
Well, and if you're listening to this right now, especially if you're like on your morning commute, you probably know exactly what happens when you try to force a behavioral change through sheer willpower.
Oh, yeah.
It looks exactly like a New Year's resolution. January 1st hits, you have this massive burst of emotional excitement, which is your personal conversion moment, right?
Yep.
You buy the expensive running shoes, you meal prep all the organic vegetables.
You're all in.
But by February 15th, the motivation just evaporates. The shoes are gathering dust. So the question the text really forces us to ask is this. Is discipleship just a rigid system of habit tracking, or is there a deeper psychological engine required to keep the momentum going?
Right.
Because people burn out incredibly fast trying to manually water that seed.
They really do. And that burnout points to the core danger the manuscript identifies, which is the trap of performance.
The trap of performance.
Yeah. When your method of quote-unquote watering the seed is just a checklist driven by fear or obligation or maybe a desperate need for community approval.
You're building a house of cards.
Precisely. The author draws an uncompromising line between genuine obedience and mere performance.
Because performance mimics spirituality.
It does. It looks like volunteering for a committee solely to secure social capital or, adhering to a moral code just because you're terrified of being ostracized.
Right.
It's incredibly fragile because its entire fuel source is external validation.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a moment here. If I am volunteering at a local food bank strictly because I want it to look good on a resume or because I want my peers to think I'm this highly moral person, isn't that sort of faking it till you make it? Still getting the job done?
That's a fair question.
Like, why does the manuscript argue that performance is so toxic if the tangible outcome is still positive? I mean, the soup is still getting served to people who need it.
Right. The soup does get served, yeah. But the manuscript argues that in the context of lifelong discipleship, the ultimate goal isn't just the delivery of the soup.
Okay.
It's the fundamental rewiring of the person holding the ladle.
Oh, that's good. The person holding the ladle.
Yeah. The text highlights Romans 12.2, which focuses on being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Right.
True obedience is supposed to flow organically from an internal paradigm shift. It's driven by intrinsic love.
Not fear.
Exactly. When you fake it till you make it in a spiritual framework, you're masking internal stagnation. The exterior facade looks pristine, but the internal architecture is basically rotting. The mechanism of fear is exhausting, but the mechanism of love is sustainable.
And you see this dynamic perfectly illustrated in the historical case of John Newton, which the text spends significant time dissecting.
Oh, Newton's story is fascinating.
It is. Newton was a slave ship captain, and his initial conversion is often romanticized as this sudden magical turnaround during a violent storm at sea.
Like a movie scene.
Right. But the reality is much more complex and much more drawn out.
Because the storm was his starting block, not his finish line.
Exactly.
The cognitive dissonance in Newton's life was profound. I mean, even after his initial conversion, he actually continued in the slave trade for a time.
Which is shocking to hear today.
It is. But it's because the total rewiring of his worldview, the sanctification, was a slow, grueling process. The deep roots of his cultural and economic conditioning had to be systematically dismantled.
Yeah, it took decades for his internal transformation to catch up with his external reality. His actual discipleship was the lifelong labor that followed. Right. Actively joining the abolitionist movement, mentoring figures like William Wilberforce to fight the slave trade in Parliament, and of course, writing the hymn, Amazing Grace.
And the author emphasizes that Newton didn't dedicate the latter half of his life to these exhausting causes to earn his salvation or, to manage his public relations.
No, he was driven by a profound, intrinsic gratitude. The obedience was a natural overflow of a rewired mind, not a fearful performance.
Absolutely. But to transition from that fearful performative state to a state of love-driven obedience, that requires a very specific internal posture.
Which the manuscript calls a teachable spirit.
Yes. It references the concept in Matthew 18 of becoming like little children.
Right, which sounds nice, but psychologically speaking, this isn't advocating for naivete or immaturity.
No, not at all. It's advocating for a radical dismantling of the ego.
Because ego acts like a firewall. If you think you already know everything, your brain filters out any new data, any feedback or correction that threatens your self-image.
It just blocks it.
Adopting a teachable spirit means actively lowering that firewall. It means developing the self-awareness to admit you're flawed, remaining open to constructive criticism, and genuinely submitting to the guidance of wiser mentors or an authoritative framework.
And without that specific type of humility, the accumulation of knowledge simply metastasizes into arrogance.
Wow. Metastasizes.
Yeah, because if your ego is fully intact, a moment of correction from a peer feels like a mortal threat. But if you have a teachable spirit, that same correction is processed as a valuable diagnostic tool for growth.
And the manuscript grounds this in a modern case study about a woman named Sarah.
Right, the professional.
Yeah, she was a highly capable professional who struggled with severe controlling tendencies. She micromanaged her team at work. She dictated every single outcome in her family's schedule.
It sounds exhausting.
It was generating massive anxiety and fracturing her closest relationships.
Well, the psychology of control is almost always rooted in fear and a lack of submission. It's this underlying belief that the universe will literally collapse if you aren't managing all the levers, which is ultimately a symptom of pride.
So through a process of mentorship, Sarah actually had to confront that pride. She had to learn the incredibly uncomfortable practice of submitting her decisions to a higher authority, letting go of her desperate need to control the narrative.
And the result of giving up that control wasn't weakness, like our culture often assumes, but a profound relational and spiritual flourishing.
It honestly reminds me of ignoring a software update on a smartphone.
Oh, the dreaded remind me tomorrow button.
Yes, the remind me tomorrow button. Exactly why do we hit that button?
Because we hate change.
Right, we refuse the update
Oh.
because we know it's going to change the interface, it's going to move our favorite apps around, and completely disrupt our comfortable digital workflow.
We prefer the familiarity of the old system, even if it's super flawed.
Even if it's flawed. But eventually the apps start crashing, the battery drains in an hour, and the screen just freezes.
You're forced to do it.
You have to submit to the update, enduring the temporary disruption of learning a new interface if you want the device to function as designed.
That's a great analogy.
A teachable spirit is essentially having the courage to hit install now on your own psychological and spiritual operating system.
And when you click install now, what you're actually doing is allowing a new code to govern your interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Once that humble posture is internalized, it dramatically alters how you engage with the world around you. You organically transition from being solely a consumer of knowledge to becoming a distributor.
And this triggers a major paradigm shift in the manuscript regarding the Great Commission, which is found in the Gospel of Matthew.
Yes.
Because the cultural assumption for a lot of people is that this text is exclusively about evangelism, like standing in a street corner with a megaphone or moving to a remote village overseas.
Right.
But the author redefines this concept entirely as a blueprint for everyday existence.
The explicit command in that ancient text is to make disciples, which the manuscript argues places every single individual in a permanent dual role.
Dual role.
Yes. You are simultaneously a student who is learning to obey and a teacher who is guiding someone else. It removes the barrier entirely between the, quote, professional clergy and the layperson.
And to prove this isn't just theory, the text looks at Lydia from the book of Acts.
Ah, Lydia.
Lydia was not a vocational missionary. She was a dealer of purple cloth, which means she was a wealthy, highly successful businesswoman operating in the upper echelons of society.
She had influence.
Tons of influence. And her discipleship did not require her to abandon her enterprise. Instead, she leveraged her existing supply chain, her network, and her large estate to create a strategic underground hub for community and mentorship.
And then you see the extreme end of the spectrum in the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Right.
He was a German theologian operating under the shadow of the Nazi regime.
Such a powerful story.
It really is. Bonhoeffer realized that a performative theoretical faith was completely useless against totalitarianism. So he actually left the safety of a teaching position in America to return to Germany, running an underground seminary for the confessing church.
Wow.
His discipleship required immense psychological and physical courage, proving that this dual role of student and teacher must be maintained in the boardroom, like Lydia, or in the face of a life and death crisis, like Bonhoeffer.
So if you are a busy professional listening to this, right, balancing a mortgage, a 9-to-5 job, and a family, you might be thinking, this sounds inspiring, but I do not have the bandwidth to be an underground resistance leader or like run a community hub out of my living room.
Right, I just need to survive Tuesday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How does the manuscript suggest an ordinary person actually integrates this high-level blueprint into a modern chaotic life without just dropping all their current responsibilities.
Well, the author clarifies that discipleship is not an addition to your calendar.
Okay.
It is a lens through which you execute your existing calendar.
Oh, that's an important distinction.
It's not about adding 40 hours of volunteer work. It is the micro decision to operate with integrity when a lucrative shortcut presents itself at the office.
Right.
It's the conscious choice to patiently mentor a struggling junior employee rather than just fixing their mistakes for them. It's the intentional restraint you show your toddler when you're operating on 4 hours of sleep.
Which is discipleship in the trenches right there.
Exactly. It's relational investment exactly where you already possess influence.
It all comes down to the mundane daily inventory of our choices and motivations. And thankfully, the manuscript doesn't just leave us with abstract theology. It provides a suite of highly actionable tools to bridge the gap between theory and reality.
Yes, the practical exercises are fantastic. The first mechanism it introduces is a recalibrated version of the personal testimony.
Right. Traditionally, a testimony is just a recounting of how someone initially found their faith.
Yeah, the starting block.
But the exercise here demands that you document your post-salvation behavioral changes. It forces you to audit your current reality. Could you point to tangible evidence that your internal software has been updated?
Right. Are your conflict resolution skills healthier than they were a year ago? Are you measurably more generous with your resources?
It prevents you from coasting on the fumes of a 5-year-old emotional experience.
Exactly.
The second tool is the daily obedience inventory, which I found incredibly practical.
He's brilliant.
The prompt asks you to isolate 3 actions you took today and rigorously evaluate the hidden motivation behind them. Were you driven by intrinsic love, or were you just checking a box to avoid guilt? It functions exactly like a financial budget.
Because a budget forces visibility on invisible habits.
Exactly. You can walk around vaguely feeling like you're financially responsible, but you do not actually know the truth until you print out your bank statements and track every single dollar.
And you might be horrified to discover you're bleeding $500 a month on takeout food.
Right. And this inventory applies that same ruthless accounting to your spiritual energy. You might assume you're living a robust life of faith, but when you track the data, you might realize you're spending 80% of your energy on performative tasks that look impressive to your neighbors but are fueled entirely by anxiety.
And the objective of that accounting isn't to bury you in guilt.
No, not at all.
It's to provide the raw data necessary to correct your trajectory. Once you see the leak, you can actively shift your investments from fear-based tasks to love-driven impact.
Which flows perfectly into the final practical tool, the spiritual brain dump. For anyone dealing with a chronically overwhelmed mind, this is absolute gold.
It is, because the modern mind is constantly maintaining dozens of open mental tabs.
Yes.
Commitments, anxieties, half-formed ideas about how to be a better person. The brain dump requires you to write every single spiritual or moral obligation pulling at your attention onto a physical piece of paper.
Just get it all out.
Yeah. And once it's externalized, you ruthlessly categorize it. What requires immediate daily action? What is actually someone else's responsibility that you're just trying to control?
Ouch. Yeah.
And what is just a vague future aspiration creating unnecessary present-day noise?
It's a systematic decluttering of your spiritual to-do list. I mean, if you're a parent trying to juggle a career and a household, you cannot physically be on 3 different charity boards and lead a weekly study group without something breaking.
Something always breaks.
This tool forces you to identify what actually yields genuine impact, allowing you to close the tabs that are just performative mental clutter. It protects your focus.
The overarching through line of the manuscript is remarkably clear, honestly. Crossing the threshold of a new life decision is vital, but it is only the doorway. The architecture of your character is built in the daily, humble, often unglamorous walk forward.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We analyzed the stark difference between the instantaneous seed of justification and the lifelong harvest of sanctification.
We explored why the psychological trap of fear-based performance will inevitably lead to burnout.
Right, and how intrinsic love is the only sustainable engine for growth.
And we examined the necessity of a teachable spirit, the willingness to lower our ego's firewall and submit to the uncomfortable process of an internal software update.
And finally, we walked through how tools like the daily obedience inventory and the brain dump can help integrate this grand blueprint into the reality of a Tuesday morning at the office.
Which is where it actually matters.
Exactly. No matter what profound journey you find yourself on right now, the initial yes is just the beginning. The real transformation happens in the quiet, methodical execution of your daily life.
Absolutely.
So we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Based on the auditing exercises we just discussed, imagine if an impartial observer were to secretly evaluate your actions over the last 48 hours.
That's a sobering thought.
Right. If they analyzed your calendar, your financial budget, and the tone of your text messages, what would they conclude? Would they see someone who is comfortably resting on a decision they made years ago? Or would they see someone actively, meticulously building a legacy? Here is your challenge for tomorrow morning. Look at your daily routine. Find just one task that you do purely out of performative obligation or the fear of being judged, and remove it.
Just cut it out.
Replace it with a single, highly intentional act of love-driven obedience that no one else will ever see. Getting your driver's license was a momentous day, but it's how you navigate the traffic tomorrow that ultimately determines where you end up.